Good morning, everyone. If we can take our seats and get started, I'd appreciate that. And the sooner we get started, the sooner you get lunch. The sooner you get lunch. And the sooner I shut up, yeah. Good morning, I'm Jeff Mount. I'm a senior fellow here at the Public Policy Institute of California. I am supposed to be Ellen Hannock as the introduction. I mean, we are identical twins after all. Ellen is feeling under the weather, so I'm covering for her today. But she is watching us online. First of all, it's wonderful to see you all. I have the usual PPIC disclaimers to make at the beginning of this talk before I jump into our policy priorities. For those of you who are not familiar with PPIC, let's talk. For those who are not familiar with PPIC, we're a nonpartisan, nonprofit policy research institute. We have offices in San Francisco and then here in Sacramento. We are a public charity. We do not take support positions on any ballot measure or legislation, nor do we support, endorse, or oppose political parties or candidates. So we're a steer-it-down-the-middle, nonpartisan group. Our goal is to connect objective research and data with real-world water management challenges for the benefit of all California's communities, economy, and the environment. So I want to acknowledge now our sponsors. Thank you so much, by the way, and many of you are here. This is really important. We have a terrific group of sponsors for today's event. And they are, in fact, the ones who have funded the production of our Priorities for California's Water report that now many of you have. For those of you who are not sponsors, please consider joining us in the future. It's great having your logo up on the back of the Priorities report, and we'd love to see it. Happy to talk to any of you about this afterwards. So, a few copies of our priority report are on each table, but I want to remind you there's a QR code on each table which allows you to access it online if you don't want to take that with you. And then there's a publications table out in the lobby which has a bunch of our publications. You can go and plunder that as well. Okay, so let's go to today's format, what we're going to do, and then, as I say, I'll dive into trying to summarize what we've got in our policy priorities report. I'm going to give a shortish presentation on this. I'm going to focus on climate change, and I'm going to blame Carla Namath for this year's policy priorities. Several years ago, Carla, in one of our presentations, said, "Are we ready?" I mean, it was just as simple as that. And then, as a group, we all looked at each other and we went, well, yes and no. I mean, there are things we're ready for and things we're not. And so that really is the roots of our policy priorities report. So I'm going to do this, and we're going to have a short break afterwards. I want to remind you, this is not like PPIC previous where you get up and you go stand in line and elbow each other at the buffet afterwards. We're bringing lunch to you at the table. So if you want lunch, sit at your table and be at your table 15 minutes after I'm done talking. But we're going to do something fun for you all today, which I think is interesting. I did this for the Water Education Foundation a few months ago, and it was a blast. We're going to do some future casting, and I'll explain the deal about why we're doing this future casting at the end of my talk, but I promise you it'll be fun. So while you eat your lunch, you're going to have a lot of entertainment, I promise. There's going to be an audience Q&A at the end of the panel. I want to remind each of you, for those of you who are here in the room and have never met a microphone you didn't like, we're going to bring the microphone to you, and we hold it, not you. Okay, and so we will hold it. We've learned the hard way over the years. That's what we do. So you raise your hand, and then for our virtual attendees, please put your questions to the email address that's on the screen right now. And we will roll through these, and if for some reason we don't get to your question, the email questions, one of us will get around to answering it afterwards. Okay, a little bit more housekeeping here before we do the presentation. The slides that are used today will be available on our website, as will the event video. It will also be posted to the website. This is really good. Please turn off your phone. Jeff. There we go. I have turned off my phone. I would like all the rest of you to turn off your phone. Mine has a particularly noisy ring. My granddaughter's name is Layla, so you can guess what my ringtone is. At least if you're old like me, you can guess what my ringtone is. Okay, and later today, please, this is very important. You're going to receive an email from us on a survey of how we're doing. We're constantly tinkering with these events. In fact, today's event is the result of some tinkering and advice we've gotten in the past. So let us know how we did and how we can fix it. Okay, so now I'm going to jump into my presentation for you all. This is, okay, good. This is, as you know, we have been doing this for many years now under the guidance of Ellen Hannock, and now we're under the guidance of Letitia Grenier. And every year we put out a policy priorities report, and we use this celebration to talk about that policy priorities report and the issues within it. So I'm going to go over that today, but I want a disclaimer right at the beginning. For those of you who've looked at our policy priority report, it's very long. It's uncharacteristically long because there are so many priorities that we need to be paying attention to. So I am going to make fun of us during this talk about our overlong policy priorities report. And that's actually kind of part of the mix of the story. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hit the highlights of this report. I'm not going to do the whole thing because I can't. There's too much in it. So I encourage you to go ahead and take a look at it and roll through it and give us your feedback on it. So the outline for today, so the talk that I want to give today to set up our panel is basically back to Carla from a few years ago, are we ready? And this is the fundamental question we're trying to tackle, and we tried to tackle this in the priorities. And we looked at, and what I'm going to do here is we're going to roll through, and actually I think I got the order wrong. We're going to talk about water for communities and for farms, flood management, freshwater ecosystems, headwaters, and wildfire, and ask this basic question, are we ready? So when I discuss each of these, I'll end with, how ready are we for climate change? One of the things that came about, and this is Letitia's influence on us in thinking, is that we may be tackling climate change wrong. And let's take the approach we're taking to adapting to climate change may need some tweaking. Let me put it that way. I want to remind you that California is the most advanced state in the union when it comes to climate change. And regardless of whoever is elected to serve in the White House, that doesn't change anything. Climate is changing, and it's changing rapidly. And the scientific consensus on this is quite solid. Are we ready for these changes, and are we going about it wrong? One of the things that we have noticed when we take a look across the board is that people or agencies, individuals, organizations tend to make lists about things they want to do. And Jay Lund famously said 10 years ago, climate change, there's something in it for everybody. And one of the issues that kept arising is whether you even believed in climate change or not, if you had a project you wanted, you called it a climate change project. And one of the things we've noticed over the years is that there's this tendency to set a date certain and a condition certain and then work toward that. 2050 being the classic example. We need to have this kind of water supply structure for 2050, and that's kind of the end of it. We don't think it's going to work that way. And that's why we need to kind of rethink how we do it. So there's lots of list making that goes on. We set target dates. We then go ahead and scope the cost of it and then freak out when this cost, and so freak out. And this is going to be really important to a couple of these areas. We freak out so much that we're paralyzed by it, and we tend to start all over again and hope the problem goes away. We think you need to take a different approach. And that different approach is really emerging in sea level rise adaptation here in California and around the world, and that is the use of adaptation pathways. Instead of building for something on a date certain and a certain condition, you set up a series of thresholds and triggers and timelines needed to respond. And that means you go much farther than, say, 2050, because the things you do today and tomorrow will actually have an influence on what happens in 2040 and 2050, long after I'm dead and gone. But the little girl that comes up on my ringtone will still be here and dealing with it. I'm talking to all you grandparents out there. It's pretty important. So we think we need to rethink how we do that. and the approach that we take and how we're doing it, and we have some suggestions in our policy priorities. The bottom line, though, is how we adapt to, some water, thanks. I've already been talking too damn much. There's my Marco Rubio moment. All right, so no one remembers that, okay. That's as partisan as we're gonna get. So one of the issues that when we think about what's going on is that we have to, first of all, remember that we are seeing a global signature in climate here in California. And when we're thinking about climate change, it is the warming of the surface of the earth that's going on. That's our metric, because everything else is derivative from that. And the heat is on here in California. You all know it. This is a projection worked up by Kyle, one of our star research associates. It's going to be hotter here, and it's baked in, and it's baked in all the way through 2050 at least. No matter how we change our actions on sequestering carbon or managing carbon, we've baked these changes in, and we need to start thinking accordingly. And then out of this is a series of derivative processes, and we need to start thinking about all of these processes and how they influence our adaptation to climate. And of course, we're familiar with all of them: shrinking snowpack, increased storm intensity, drought intensity, shorter wet seasons, we're kind of getting a look at that this year, climate whiplash, and rising seas. All of these factors have to be considered as we're doing it. So the question we ask in our priorities, are we ready for this array of climate pressures that are coming? And we look at it, and of course in this report, we look at it by sectors. So let me just go through some of the highlights in here. First of all, we asked our question, how ready are we for water for communities and farms, for changes that are coming? And it's interesting, okay, so for those of you who like Americana music, I suggest Robert Earl Keen's famous song, It's the Little Things. Go look it up after you get back. It starts out with that note you left on the breakfast table to help me plan my day. Here is our note on the breakfast table to help you plan your day. This is the classic PPIC blast, where we are showing you all the problems, all the potential solutions. But the issue we want to get across is, if you look at the two sides of the column, okay, the major issues we have today and our potential adaptation measures, what we're not doing is merging those two together in an understanding of how climate is influencing our response. We tend to focus on trying to solve the problem of today or some imagined future. And that's the point of ours, is to blend these together. And I want to tell you, let's stop for a second and congratulate ourselves. And we never do, right? My nickname is Dr. Doom, to those who know me, and I'm usually just saying, we're screwing everything up. No, we're not. To the chagrin of the New York Times, California has not dried up and blown away. We are handling, our economy is not being dramatically affected, unless in parts of the farm community, by these changes. We are adapting, and we're adapting well. We're seeing significant conservation in urban use. We're seeing changes in the Safer Water program, which is improving water for communities. We really have been pointed in the right direction. And we need to celebrate that, and then to urge, because there are definite problems ahead, but we need to tell ourselves where we are doing well. And that's what we do in our priorities. The place where we have some real difficult work ahead is in the farm community. We're going to hear about that in our panel. And so we would call this tough sledding or difficult work underway, but probably pointed in the right direction. The Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, the most significant water act in our lifetime, in all of our lifetimes, is really playing a major role in that. And up here is something that Alvar, who you'll hear from in a little bit, put together for us, which looks at where the changes in water supply are coming from and where the big impacts are. And you notice the climate's a small part of that, and it's actually Sigma, which is pushing that. But what we're not talking about is how climate affects Sigma. Yes, the GSPs, the groundwater sustainability plans, do incorporate some climate change, but there's two miracles that are going to occur. Somehow everything's going to be solved in 2040, and everything will be fine after that. That's not the case. We know that's not the case because we haven't thought that much about how climate will affect those, particularly sustainability going on past 2040. The second place that we are making headway, but is some tough work ahead, is headwaters and wildfire. In our policy priorities piece, we look at what's going on in headwaters and wildfire. We see a number of major challenges. Of course, this is the increasing of the number of high-severity days. That extraordinarily awful fire we just had in Southern California is an example of that. And of course, we continue to put people in harm's way. But the adaptation measures that we have, which we're focusing on right now, particularly increased prescribed fire, and expanding managed fire, trying to get people out of the forest, all those things that we're talking about are all focused on today. They're not focused on the changing conditions that are going to happen over the next 20, 30, and 40 years. And so what we're saying is you need adaptation pathways to be built into headwater forest management. So we label this as difficult work ahead, or tough sledding, however you want to put it, because we are pointed in the right direction and we have the tools. We just need to spend a lot more effort worrying about adaptation pathways when it comes to headwater forest management. Now, this is what I get all Dr. Doomy on you. There are two areas where we really need to rethink what we're doing. And I know people who've been listening to me for 20 years. I mean, Kurt Schmoody's in the audience, and Kurt and I have been talking about this for more than 25 years. He's my neighbor, so we talk about it a lot. And that's flood management in general. We are ignoring climate change when it comes to flood management. And how can I say such a thing? Every policy tool that we have in place to manage floods is built upon the hydrology of the past, not the future. And even the capturing of the hydrology of the past sets a minimal federal standard. So we have literally millions, tens of millions of Californians who are at a very high risk of a flood. At the very same time, the consensus view that's coming out of climate modelers is our flood risk, the likelihood of large floods, is increasing substantially. This is an out of sight, out of mind problem that is going to bite us. And I'm sure of that. I mean, we've got Carla here. She'll stop soon enough, probably stop worrying about water supply and worrying about too much, like as you did in 2023, for example, when we had flooding in the Tulare Basin. We, as a society, have not gotten our heads around this, and the federal government's not being a large amount of help, no matter who's in office. So we view this one as in need of a major policy overhaul in flood management. And we say so repeatedly in this. The other place where we are doing a lot of work, and the Brown administration and the Newsom administration deserve credit, both administrations really leaning into trying to deal with this problem of declining ecosystem health in California. Obviously, we've written extensively about this. I want to encourage you all to go back and look at this wonderful thing that Ted Summer wrote for us this last year on basically the use of tools, the kind of tools we have for adapting to climate change. And although we have a salmon strategy, that salmon strategy neglects a couple things. First of all, most rivers in California don't have salmon in them. That's a start or a concern. And most of the strategy itself is a series of things we want to do about today without fully integrating what the future looks like and those pressures on it. So we are really facing some big challenges, and we need probably a top-down overthink. That's the best way I can describe it, rethink of what we've got in ecosystem management. So I'm telling you, this one is sitting there in the future. I don't know who's in here from Fish and Wildlife, but we may have a third year of no commercial and recreational fishery in salmon that come out of the Sacramento River. Things are dire, and we really need to rethink where we're going with that. And most of all, I will tell you, what we're not thinking about is how to integrate climate into that. This next winter, Jennifer Harder, who is, I think is here, where she is going to author something which will be very interesting. She's writing for us a sort of the policy side of managing ecosystems and species
How are the policies? Is the Endangered Species Act the barrier we all seem to think it is? And the answer is no, it's not. It's not. So look for that this fall. So let me sum up here. Global climate is changing. No matter who's elected, anywhere, it's changing. And we, as a state, are a global leader in both mitigation and hopefully our argument is adaptation. We need to continue to take that on, and there's so many opportunities. And it's one of the greatest things about being in California, working on water, is that we're not convincing anybody, having to convince anybody there's a problem. We are literally just arguing about the solutions and how to fund them in particular. Okay, we argue in this policy priorities report, we need a kind of a new approach, and that's why we like this notion of adaptation pathways. The reason is it gets rid of that sticker shock that you see at the front, which paralyzes us. We do it in a stepwise fashion, and it encourages us to think modularly. I know that's a nerdy term, but let me give you an example. When we talk about trying to do flood control here in the Central Valley, stop thinking you're building a flood control structure which is for 2050. It's not. Everything we have in our infrastructure is already 100 years old, close to 100 years old. You need to think long-term. How will you change it in the future when you know more about future conditions? So I really think that's extremely important. I will tell you, we should pat ourselves on the back where we are making progress. Our major urban areas, the planning is going reasonably well. There's lots to do, but it's going reasonably well. People are not without water, and we're making significant strides in some of our communities, not all of them. We got hard work ahead of us in the farm community as we adapt to basically cutting 2 million acre-feet of water out of the San Joaquin in particular and bringing balance throughout the farm community. We know that's going to be tough sledding ahead. Same for headwater communities. We are doing good things. We're not having to convince anybody anymore there's a problem. We're now just, again, arguing about the solution. And finally, we really think very strongly flood control has been ignored because it's such a difficult conversation, and ecosystem management has not been ignored. It's just really difficult, hard to do. So we need to do that. And with that, let me get to this. I was supposed to be Ellen Hannock at the beginning. As I said, Ellen's feeling a bit under the weather. She's watching us at home today. This is my opportunity to thank my dear friend and very close colleague for the work she has done in her leadership in building the Water Policy Center. She said 10 years ago, started on this. And inviting me in, I will forever be grateful for the fact that she invited me in. I am talking just for myself right now because after all, it's all about me. In the arc of my career, once I gave up working on rocks and started working on rivers, there are three people who've made an extraordinary influence on my life. The first was Peter Moyle, who changed the way I thought about everything. And he's also the nicest man and the smartest biologist I've ever met. The second was this crazy engineer, Jay Lund, who had a solution for everything, because that's what engineers do. And only the problem is, I always discovered with Jay's solutions, they were like brackets like this. But that's okay, at least you bracketed it in. So brilliant Jay Lund, and now Ellen Hannock is the third one. And Ellen has been so transformative to my life, both as a good friend and a great colleague. But I must tell all of you, she has changed the course of water and the way we manage water and think about water like no one else has. If you're involved in anything in water, Ellen's got fingerprints all over it. So superior intellect, diminutive height, superior intellect, powerful woman, soulless economist. Oh wait, I shouldn't have said that. But a soulless economist, hard-boiled on the outside, and inside, the sweetest person you've ever met. So I would like us to offer to Ellen, who's watching, a round of applause, and thank you, Ellen Hannock. Okay, and those of you who know Ellen, she would be crying right now. I mean, my first talk with Ellen that we did was a big talk, and when she got to the fish that were dying, she started crying. What? there's no crying in water. And anyways, that revealed the hard-boiled economist with a very sweet insight. Okay, so the next step that we're going to do now, and I'm keeping on track because no one wants to deal with Hannah in the back if you're not on track. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to do something really fun. As I said in the beginning, we tried this the other day, so we're going to take a break here while they're getting all the food out for us. It looks like they're way ahead of schedule on that. So you have to be back in your seats and for sure within 15 minutes. But what we're doing is we're turning something around. And I want you to think about what we're doing here. The talk that I gave at the Water Education Foundation, I put up a series of headlines from Aquafornia. And I said the first thing I said was, it's no longer called Aquafornia. It's because Florida wouldn't allow it. It was called something else. We came up with some other name. But the Aquafornia headlines I put up were all from 2050. And the idea was that what if we, if not solved a problem, we managed a problem effectively? So, I mean, I can see Karen Ross sitting here, and I'm thinking, imagine Karen Ross in 2050 saying, we have achieved balance in water supply for farms, and at the same time, we're still a global leader in the farm world. Imagine you could say that, Karen, and then the question I asked is, what had to happen for that to happen? And that's what we're going to do, is like when we think about what had to have happened to achieve success, which is reverse engineering. And when I sat down and did it myself, I was thinking about, for some of these, when I sat down and did it myself, I thought, you discover the bottlenecks real quickly and what the highest priorities have to be when you ask yourself, what had to happen? So we will do that, and we're going to do it in 15 minutes, according to my boss. So be back in your seats for sure at 12:15, and we will have a very entertaining panel run by Leticia Grenier. Thank you. Enjoy your break.